Hey folks, Pat McQuaid here. Super pumped to introduce my next guest, John Morris. John graduated from West Point, was commissioned as an armor officer where he went on to be a tank commander for 2 deployments to Iraq. John got back, had a series of different jobs in the Army, including teaching at West Point, getting his Ph.D., learning multiple languages, and serving on the nuclear inspection team when the Ukraine war broke out. John's newest venture is author to this book, Students to Soldiers, Secret Military Education at Elite Schools, 1815 to 1845. So please pull up a chair and let's get going. All right, John, finally you have your debut on the national audience of the Pat McQuaid podcast, international according to some YouTube metrics recently. Dude, thanks for coming in.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me.
Well, John and I go way back to when I was about 3 years old in Greg Morris's kindergarten class when we got caught smuggling R-rated movies through school, you know? So, John, just wanted to get a little bit on your background, where you're from, your West Point story, but really anything you want to talk about, man, including your book later on in the interview. But sure. So tell me, even though I know the answers to a lot of these questions, the audience does not. Where are you from? How'd you end up at West Point?
Yeah, so I grew up in East Greenwich, Rhode Island.
Mm-hmm.
Most of your listeners, I think, are Rhode Islanders, right?
Yeah.
But hopefully going national and
international.
international.
You know? Yeah.
Yeah. So I grew up in East Greenwich, which is a small town, well, medium-sized town, about 30,000 people nowadays, or 20,000 maybe.
Yeah.
Back then it was a little bit smaller. And in high school, I got a bit interested in the military academy at West Point and decided to apply.
And you were going to East Greenwich High at this point, right?
Yeah. Yep.
What's that process like? Do you have to start that earlier than the standard college experience?
Yeah, a bit earlier.
Yeah.
In fact, I went for like a summer camp in between my junior and senior years.
Okay.
And so that was sort of my introduction to West Point, and also, I guess I was ahead of the curve when it came to applying.
Mm-hmm.
And then really in the fall, you have to be pretty quick to apply,
Mm-hmm.
both for your congressional nomination and also
Mm-hmm.
for the school itself, the admissions department of the school itself. And yeah, like other colleges and universities, I guess you find out in the winter or like early spring.
Yeah. And for the congressional candidacy, from your home state, you have to either get a congressman or a senator.
Right.
Right. And can they do multiple letters, or do they have a cap on the number of people that they can nominate?
Have a cap on the total number at each academy.
Gotcha. Okay.
And I believe it's something like one per year.
Okay. So it's competitive. There's a selectivity about it before you even apply.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah.
And the two application processes occur simultaneously.
Mm-hmm.
So you're sort of working on both at the same time,
Mm-hmm.
trying to, I was actually nominated by Senator Chafee at the time, who was our Republican senator.
The father.
The father.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah. And he was in the military as well, wasn't he?
I think he was. I think he was a World War II vet.
Yeah. I think he was in like Guadalcanal or
Mm-hmm.
something like that.
Could be, yeah.
But so you show up at West. Can you remember rolling into West Point the first time? Is it your plebe year? Is that what they call it?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I started active service, I guess you'd call it, by and reception day. It's called our day, on the 29th of June, 98. So it's only a couple weeks out of high school. And
Did your dad drive you up?
My dad and mom and
Yeah.
Greg.
Oh, well, for those of
We're all
you
there.
out there, John's dad is named Brian Morris. He's sadly not with us anymore, but he was, I like to describe him as one of the best guys I ever met. 250 pounds of anger and cholesterol, but he absolutely was as faithful and loyal a friend that you could come by.
Yeah,
So
he'd give you the shirt off his back.
he sure would. And so when you first got there, the first year they do a lot of training and kind of the indoctrination phase, right?
Yeah, yeah. So right, you start with I believe it's 7 or 8 weeks of basic training, cadet basic training. About half of which is in garrison, kind of learning the basic soldier skills like marching and how to stand in formation, how to salute, all
How
that
to make
stuff.
your bed.
How
Yeah.
to make your bed, how to clean your room.
Yeah.
And then about half of which is in the field, kind of learning basic soldiering.
And that's in the
field
summer
craft.
before.
That's the summer before
Okay.
the first academic year. And then then you roll into what's called reorganization week or reorgy week, which tends to be very intense because now you're facing down, it's the 3-to-1 ratio of upperclassmen to plebes, whereas
Yeah.
in the summer it's something like, one upperclassman for every 5 plebes.
Gotcha. So
And,
the tables have turned a little
Yes,
bit.
and so very intense, and then you start the academic year the following week, and that runs like most other schools, right? You have a fall semester, spring semester, and then the second summer you go into more of an intense, again, 7 or 8 weeks of field training.
Is that at West Point?
That's at a place called Camp Buckner, which is right around the corner from West Point.
Gotcha. And then what's your typical day like at the academy?
Yeah, well, it starts. It depends on. I mean, you do have a bit of a bit of choice. For example, if you wanted to go for a run or go to the gym, you could do that in the morning. I never did that. I would get up about 6:30, go to formation at 7:15, go to breakfast. Everyone, all 4,000 of us, eat meals at the same time.
Yeah.
March
Same
into
place?
the mess hall and march into the same mess hall, right,
Oh,
at the
wow.
same time, and eat meals, eat breakfast and lunch were mandatory with formations beforehand, and then dinner was mandatory on Thursdays when I was a cadet, and the rest of the time it was kind of a buffet style where you sort of could go between 6 and 7:30, something like that.
Gotcha.
So breakfast formation, breakfast, 4 periods in the morning.
Oh, wow. So back-to-back class.
Back-to-back class, and then 3 periods in the afternoon. Sometimes you have a period off, right,
Yep.
where you could go back to your room and take a nap or study or whatever. And then 1600, 4 o'clock in the afternoon, we'd have either intramurals or drill for practice for parades. Monday through Thursday, and then Friday afternoon is generally free. And then
Were weekends free?
weekends were not generally free. You'd have either classes on Saturday morning, a parade on Saturday morning, football game to go to on Saturday afternoon, which were mandatory to attend. And then Sunday is generally free.
Gotcha.
And in the evening, in the weekdays, you generally get kind of what we called hazed by the upperclassmen for about an hour, and then evening study period began at 19:30, 7:30, and ran until 11:30, which was lights out.
Yeah. And then the hazing, was it, I think a lot of us think of hazing might be, someone screaming in your face to tie your shoes a certain way or whatever. But, also you see hazing in, the secular world of fraternities and sororities and so forth.
Right.
Some of that seems to be a little bit more alcohol focused.
Yes.
But what sort of hazing was going on at the academy?
Yeah, so first of all, and we'll maybe get into this when
With
we
your
talk
book,
about the
yeah.
book. The term hazing is really only an American term. The Brits do not recognize that term. They would say, something like bullying,
Yeah.
which doesn't really capture the kind of acculturation that's taking place during the time that you're being hazed.
Yeah.
Hazing is sort of it's illegal, right, at the military academies because by definition it means physical or mental abuse, right? So when I use the term, I'm sort of using it. I'm being liberal in my usage of that term.
Yeah.
Right, because we weren't getting physically abused, right?
Yeah.
We were getting humiliated
Yeah.
and mentally abused, I
Yeah.
think, to an extent. But a lot of it was just, for example, we had to do duties in the evening, which meant we delivered the upperclassmen's laundry, their mail.
Yeah.
And that was especially kind of intense 1 or 2 days a week when the laundry or the dry cleaning would come in.
Right.
Right. And, the upperclassmen could sort of hang out outside the duty room where we'd have all the laundry and all of us assembled, sometimes 20 or even 30 of us in the same room.
Yeah.
And anytime one of us would come out of the room, we'd kind of get swarmed by a pack of upperclassmen checking our uniform, checking to make sure our shoes were perfectly shined and edge dressed.
Yeah.
That we had a perfect dress off, which is sort of the shirt tucked into the pants as tightly as possible, et cetera, et cetera. And then during that time, if you weren't squared away, so to speak, the upperclassmen would start quizzing you on your knowledge, which we had several, probably 100 pieces of knowledge that we had to memorize.
Yeah. General's Army year.
Right.
Yeah.
As well as things like the definition of leather or Schofield's definition of discipline or,
Right.
MacArthur's farewell address or,
Yeah.
and then also every day we had to know a few articles from the New York Times. Okay. So you had to, usually it was like one sports, one entertainment, and like 2 news articles that you had to be able to brief the upperclassmen on if asked.
Okay.
You had to know 3 meals in advance what was being served in the mess hall if anybody asked you.
Okay. What years were you there?
I was there from, like I said, the summer of '98 to June 1st. I graduated June 1st of 2002.
June 1st so you were in the first graduating class after 9/11.
Yes. And 9/11 occurred in the fall of my senior year, or my first year, we call it. So
yeah. Can you remember, like, take us to West Point on that day?
Yeah, sure. So I was going to, I forget what hour it was. It might have been 3rd hour in the morning or 2nd hour in the morning. I remember I had an American history class. I think it was the American social history, something like that. And when my professor entered the class, the professor from the previous hour was still there, and he had the TV on. And we were sort of starting to understand that something had happened, right, in New York, World Trade Center. But, my professor turned the TV off, started class, and we didn't stop that day. We did not, I believe there was an announcement made at lunch, right? But we kept our schedule. We did not change at all, which I think the superintendent, to his credit,
was that General Lennox?
That was General Lennox. Okay. Yes.
He went to high school with my dad.
I know
Cardinal
that.
Hayes.
Yeah.
So you go through the day knowing that this major event
right.
has happened. and everyone's probably talking about it, but you're carrying out the order of the day.
Exactly.
And so
And
it's not
then-
until later in the evening.
Right. And we had basically two watering holes where you could drink on post. One was the officer club, and that was basically so you could not drink at all, regardless of your age, as a freshman or a sophomore, a plebe or a plebe or a yearling. You could drink if you were 21 your junior year, and that the only option was the officers club. And you had to go in uniform. As a firstie or a senior, we had a club called the Firstie Club, and it was only for seniors. And and that evening, it was packed, and everybody was sort of
Transfixed.
right, and angry, impulsive.
What was
like the country itself, I think.
right? But it's a unique group because you guys know what this means for the country.
Yeah.
So were people, trepidatious about it, or were they licking their lips like, I can't wait to go beat up on whoever did this?
I think the latter. Really licking their lips, and of course, we didn't know how long.
Right.
The kind of the response. In fact, we didn't know what the response would be at that point.
Right.
I think maybe there were. I'm not sure when the information came out that it was kind of it had emanated from Afghanistan. Probably within days, right?
Right.
But we knew there'd be some response, and I think. When I entered the academy in '98, there were upperclassmen. We had a 5-year commitment, right?
Yeah.
On paper, 5-year commitment after graduation to serve in the Army. There were upperclassmen talking in the late '90s about getting out after 3 years because the Army was still kind of shrinking from the post-Cold War era, and we didn't really see a need for. A lot of us really kind of scratched our heads and wondered what we'd be doing,
right?
Because it was sort of that the end of history, Fukuyama's famous phrase. Kind of, it was an era of peacekeeping in the '90s. Some humanitarian missions that Clinton, had initiated, but President Bush had basically said we're not doing that anymore, right? We're going to sort of, pull back from those.
Scale back some of the bloat of the military budget.
Yeah. And so, when 9/11 occurred, I think a lot of us felt like we finally had a purpose.
Yep.
Right. And as I said, we were very impulsive, and I think that reflected the mood of the country, and unfortunately, our politicians in the years that followed were also very impulsive and made some serious mistakes, in my opinion, particularly in invading Iraq.
Yep. And so you, at this point in your military career, do you have your MOS or your job that you're going into, whether it's infantry or tanks or whatever?
It's a good question. I don't think we had what's called branch night yet, where we found out what branch
that you were going to.
We would be going to, right?
Yeah.
But I believe we had already put our preferences in, and depending on your class rank, quite a significant proportion of the Corps gets their first or second choice. My choice was armor and cavalry. So that was probably a month or two away, and then post night, to find out where you're being posted, comes another month or two after branch night. And don't quote me on these timelines.
No,
I don't have it in front of me, but
yeah.
But yeah, so I actually was able to get both my first choice in branch, armor and cav, and also in post, which was Germany. You got to either there were a certain number of slots, maybe like 10 slots for 1st Armored Division and 10 slots for 1st Infantry Division, both of which at the time were stationed in Germany, for the armor and cab officers.
Gotcha.
Right.
Yeah.
And so basically how it would go is kind of a fun process. Like you'd be called based on your class rank. So the number one, maybe he was number, I don't know, 3 or 5 in the class, who was our top, the top ranking armor officer, future armor officer. He got first pick, and then it sort of went from there. And I was maybe, I don't know, maybe number 10 in the branch. And so I picked 1st Armor Division in Germany. I knew nothing about 1st Armor Division. I knew nothing about Germany.
Right. But presumably you went to armor school immediately upon graduation.
Yes. Yeah.
Who was your graduate? Does the president speak at every graduation?
No, but President Bush spoke at ours.
Yeah.
They rotate. They go from academy to academy,
Yeah.
Depending on the year. But President Bush gave his kind of infamous speech to our class.
Why is it infamous?
On June 1st, because that's where he laid out the idea of kind of preventative war, and basically
the Bush doctrine.
Yeah, and started preparing the country for the invasion of Iraq, which is probably already in his head by that point.
Yeah.
We had a 2-month. Basically, if you wanted to take it, you could take 60 days of leave in between. In between graduation and reporting to your first duty station, which was for training purposes, right? So I went to Fort Knox. It was a temporary duty, not a permanent change of station. So reported on August 1st, and then my class, my Armor Officer Basic course, started a couple weeks later and ran until just before Christmas. And that's where we learned kind of the basics of officership, as well as the basics of kind of technical and tactical knowledge of leading a tank platoon.
Have you ever seen the movie Fury?
I have. Yeah.
Thoughts?
Yes. It's been a while, but it seemed pretty accurate to me.
Yeah.
Of course, those tanks, there was a lot more room inside those tanks. An M1A1 Abrams is very tight inside because of all the equipment and it just gets tighter with the digital upgrades and all that. The M60s, M48s, M60s, which were the predecessors, M48s and M60s have the same hull, we call it, right?
Yeah.
And there's a lot of room in there. And then the World War II tanks, probably even more.
Right.
I don't know the specifics.
I'll tell you, some of those scenes are pretty cool, though.
Yeah.
When they're doing like the tank on tank battles, because you don't really see that in any other movie.
Right.
But presumably, tanks are designed to fight other tanks.
Yes.
Right. And so this takes us probably the end of 2002.
Yep. And then I stayed on to go to the Scout Leader course after I graduated, and I was in the Scout Leader course, I believe, when the invasion of Iraq started.
Okay. So this is like April of 2003.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Right. I went to Ranger School in the summer, and by the time I got to my first unit, it was August of 2003. My unit, which was, actually the entire 1st Armor Division, but my unit specifically, 1st Brigade, 1st Armor Division, was deployed at the time. And they had not been part of the invasion force, but they had arrived in, I believe it was May, early May.
Okay.
And so I sort of waited to deploy, finally deployed in October, and got to my 1st battalion in the first week of November, and took my platoon, I think it was 3 days later.
Wow. And so where'd you go?
So that was Baghdad. We were in Baghdad, and the deployment up to that time, there had been a couple of attacks on the battalion.
Yeah.
But it was relatively quiet
Mm-hmm.
until about October, November,
Right. Mm-hmm.
which is when the kind of the insurgency picked up
Yeah.
in Baghdad and
Had,
elsewhere.
had there been a large tank presence in Afghanistan, or due to the nature of the terrain in Afghanistan, it wasn't really the demand for
Yeah,
that?
the latter. I mean, it wasn't really a demand for armored units,
Yeah.
and our footprint in Afghanistan at that time was pretty small.
Yeah.
So it was a lot of special forces, light infantry units.
Mm-hmm.
I couldn't name the units, but
Yeah.
something like the 101st Airborne or 82nd Airborne,
Yeah.
Ranger regiments,
Mm-hmm.
special forces.
Yeah. So were you in Baghdad the whole time, or did you?
Yeah. So
Yeah.
no.
Yeah.
So the unit was actually scheduled to redeploy in April, right? So that would have been a year, right? Which was the standard length of the deployments at that point. And but things had gotten pretty intense in March, April, early April, and
Your deployments are typically about a year.
Yeah.
In the Army. Okay.
yeah. So the deployment should have been, 364 days, right?
Yeah.
But we got extended. And so, at that point I had been platoon leader for 5 months and mostly patrolling in
Yeah.
Baghdad, daily patrols. We'd gotten, we'd had quite a few IED attacks, some small arms attacks, but we were not using tanks. We were using Humvees at the time. They were just, when I first arrived, they were just your standard Humvees, unarmored, for use behind the battlefield in Europe, right? For sort of transporting and command and control behind the front lines. And obviously Iraq, there was no front line, right? It was a 360-degree battlefield.
Right.
So, so we started up armoring the Humvees in like November, and so by that time we had some up armored from the factory Humvees come into country as well by that time, but we got extended, and it was a 3-month extension, and we were ordered to go down to Karbala, which is about 50 miles south of Baghdad. It's a pretty holy city for the Shia Muslims. The reason being that Muqtada al-Sadr had started his own insurgency.
Yeah.
Now, up until that point, we had been fighting mostly Sunni Muslims, the ones who were
In
supporters, right? The
Yeah.
minority of the country, but that had backed Saddam Hussein. Sadr was a Shiite, and his insurgency was a Shiite insurgency, and they had basically captured the town of the city of Karbala, and whatever U.S. units were in that area, they didn't have the numbers to be able to retake the city. So that was our mission. We got down there, and in May and June, we recaptured the city. We rolled into the city with tanks. We basically drove the militia out or killed them.
And fought your way through the city.
Fought our way through the city. Took a few casualties, and a few KIA, and then we redeployed to Germany in June, July.
How many soldiers are in one platoon, one armor platoon?
Yeah, so an armor platoon is 4 tanks and 16 soldiers. So one officer, a platoon sergeant, who my platoon sergeant had about 20 years in the Army by that time, and then 2 staff sergeants. In my case, they'd been in the Army 8 or 10 years, and then your gunners, the guy who actually maneuvers and fires the main gun on the tank, they're all they're supposed to be E5s, so
Gotcha.
sergeants, and then your loaders and your drivers are soldiers, anywhere from private to specialist.
Well, before we continue, I just want to say on behalf of myself, but everyone listening, how grateful we are for your service and
Thank you.
your time over there.
Thanks,
That is not forgotten and still very much appreciated to this day.
Thanks,
So,
Pat.
so you go to Germany, and then one of the things I wanted you to touch on was the diversity of your career within the Army. It seems like you had multiple opportunities for different experiences throughout the time you were there, and I was just wondering if you could speak about that a little bit.
Yeah, sure. So, well, that first tour was 4 years in Germany.
Yeah.
So my first deployment to Iraq was 9 months. The unit was there for like 15, but I was there personally for 9 months. And then we deployed again for 13 months to Nineveh province in the northwest of Baghdad, and then again we got a mission to go retake a city, which in this case was Ramadi, in 2006 into 2007, and that was a brutal deployment. Not for me personally. I was on battalion staff, so I was a bit removed from the fighting by that point. But for the battalion itself, I mean, we took 100 casualties in a battalion of 700.
Oh man.
So that was a rough one. But the brigade itself, the brigade combat team under Colonel Sean McFarland, later to be 3-star General McFarland, was very successful in not only taking the city block by block, but also in brokering kind of a peace with the insurgents, the Sunnis in that area, who had it was called the Anbar Awakening, if you've heard of that.
Yeah.
So that was in we got back to Germany in early 2007, and then I stayed on. I was basically the battalion commander left in June of 2007, and I basically took control of the remaining 100 or so soldiers, and kind of was in charge of getting them to their next place of duty, or getting them out of the army if they were done with their time. If they had served less than a couple of years in Germany and they still had time to serve in overseas, then we shuffled them off to other bases, because our base was being shut down in Friedberg, which was about 30 minutes north of Frankfurt. And so I left. I didn't leave until August of 2007, which made the tour 4 years. And it was a hard decision for me. I loved Germany. I loved that area of Germany. I actually thought about staying in Germany, and I was at the 5-year mark at that point, so I could have gotten out of the army. So it was a hard decision. In the end, I chose to do what I thought would be one last tour, where I go to Fort Knox, try to stay on at go to Fort Knox for the maneuver captain's career course, maybe a couple of other courses. I ended up going to the cavalry leaders course, airborne school, tank commanders course in that following year. And then I was going to try to kind of do my command there at Knox, and then get out. So the first part of that plan, I went to command a basic training company, which I really enjoyed and I thought I was really good at. And then I said, you know what, I really like this training and teaching thing. Maybe I'll apply to teach at West Point. Let's see what happens.
Yeah.
Got turned down my first time. And then my dad actually said, John, why don't you just apply? It's like you have like a 2-year window. Why don't you just apply one more time, see what happens? So I applied, and I got picked up to teach at West Point. And then I said, you know what? By the way, I also got picked up to transfer from out of armor and cav into what's called the Foreign Area Officer Program, and that had been something I was interested in. I'd been interested in, for several years at that point, and I got picked up to do that as well. So both those acceptances occurred at about the same time, and I said, you know what, the Army's given me everything I've asked for here. I guess I'm going to stay in.
Yep.
At that point, I had 8 years of service. And if you stay in past that, nowadays it's a bit different because the pension system is a bit different. But for my year group and for my peers, if you stayed in past 8 or 10 years, you might as well stay in for 20 to get your pension.
Yeah.
And so yeah, my next stop was I had to apply to grad school. I applied to a few grad schools, and I got into Columbia in New York City, which was my first choice. And so I decided to go to New York and study.
And what were you studying?
So by the way, I had applied to teach history at West Point.
Yeah.
They accepted me into the military history division in the Department of History. And so I asked them, I said, hey, I got accepted to Columbia. Will you pay for that? Yes, we will. That's a great school. Just make sure. Hudson? Yeah, just down the Hudson. Just make sure you study. You take 1 or 2 courses on, they're military related, because they don't have a military history offering at Columbia usually. So I said, all right, and I ended up studying modern European history. That was the Ph.D. program I was accepted into, but there was at that point, it was a 2-year master's degree. I was not planning on continuing the PhD work after those 2 years. So I did the 2-year master's. I went to teach for 2 years at West Point. I taught military history. It's called we call it military art, mil art. Taught that for 2 years. Loved teaching, although it was an incredibly busy time in my life, but I loved teaching, and it was a great tour. And then after that, I went to California to study Russian for a year, because that was going to be my control language for being a foreign area officer.
Okay.
Did that for a year, and then
hold on 1 second, John.
Yeah.
So you spent a year at Stanford learning Russian.
Actually, not Stanford. It was actually the Defense Language Institute in Monterey.
Oh, okay.
So beautiful place.
Not a bad place to be posted, right?
Yeah, and I think they do that purposely, because if it were in Nebraska, I think you'd have multiple suicides.
Yeah.
from the language school, because the language school it's about 6 to 7 hours of class a day, and then a few hours of homework after that. So it's in the meantime, I was also doing what we call the Box of Books Command and General Staff College. So doing that online to get basically certified for the next phase of my career. So after a year of Russian, I get, so my career since then has really been kind of, not the typical career for a European foreign area officer. I went to Turkey for a year to work. Izmir, Turkey is where NATO Land Command is, and so I went to work as a political advisor at NATO Landcom.
And what year is this?
This would be 2015 to 16.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the invasion of Crimea had happened.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. And so NATO was already kind of reorienting towards Russia, and commander that I worked for was a great general officer, General Mick Nicholson, and he was a 3-star at the time. He went on to command in Afghanistan after being in Izmir. And then after that, I got an opportunity to go to Tel Aviv, Israel.
So you're in Tel Aviv at this point, and how do you like your time there?
I loved it. I loved Israel.
It's a special place, isn't it?
Yeah, it really is. Loved the people, the food. Lived in a beautiful apartment about a 10-minute bike ride from the beach. Uh, the work was interesting, not particularly challenging. I worked for the Office of Defense Cooperation, which basically manages all the military cooperation and military assistance between the Department of Defense and the Israeli Defense Forces. And spent about 2.5 years there, and then I headed to. I got again accepted to go back to Columbia for a year to finish my Ph.D. I'd been working on and off on a project I had in mind, and the Army was gracious enough to let me go back for a year. Now, a year then necessitates 3 years of obligation, so that was going to take me over 20 years, but I was happy to do it, and went back to New York for a year, which became almost a year and a half because of COVID, and finished the PhD officially in October of 2020, and then I got my next assignment, which was to the Defense Threat Reduction Agency in Washington, D.C., in Fort Belvoir, is actually in Virginia, a bit south of D.C., and that was to be an inspection division team chief, or basically to lead a group of from all branches, soldiers, sailors, airmen, to train up for and then conduct inspections of Russian nuclear sites, and also host the Russians when they came here to inspect our nuclear sites under the New START Treaty. Now, because of COVID, that was the initial excuse. We were not doing inspections in 2021 into 2022. But then the Russians decided that they did not want to restart start a new start.
Yeah.
And so unfortunately I did not get a chance to go into Russia in that assignment. That was really disappointing. But we did do a lot of training, and we took a couple of trips to Germany, to Japan, which are our kind of entry points traditionally into Russia to conduct the inspections. And we did quite a few kind of mock inspections or mock hosting exercises at U.S. nuclear bases. So that was kind of cool to see those, and to see our nuclear arsenal.
Yeah. One of the few to experience that, I would imagine.
Yeah.
Now, did you have like a technical expertise at all, or was it more on the diplomatic side of the house?
So yeah, our job is, as FAOs, as foreign area officers, is more the diplomatic aspect of the inspections. We also have on the team, we have several interpreters, Russian interpreters. So even though I speak Russian fairly fluently, we're actually supposed to keep everything in English and let our official interpreters translate for us.
Gotcha.
And on each team, there's a weapons sergeant who has expertise in nuclear weapons.
Gotcha.
Yeah, so that's where kind of the technical expertise lies on each team.
I mean, so did you find yourself feeling like you were like tip of the spear or was it kind of like you were this group that didn't really have the green light to go ahead and do your work? Because And I say that knowing that the context of the geopolitical situation around you with Ukraine and Putin, starting to really flex his nuclear muscle a little bit.
Yeah.
Did it feel like you guys were, just didn't get the green light to do your work, or were you an important part of the conversation from a diplomatic?
I think the former. I think
Yeah.
it just felt like we didn't have the green light. I mean, typically, so let's say from about 2014 to about 2020, when the inspection stopped because of COVID. Those inspection teams were really important to to our national defense, national security, because they were really the only military personnel that were allowed to go into Russia or encouraged to go into Russia, right? And so, so losing that ability was not a good thing.
Yeah.
And I'm sure actually the Russians feel the same, but they felt that it was more valuable, I guess, to keep us out of Russia than to get eyes on our bases here in the U.S.
Right.
Yeah, and so the invasion of Ukraine, the full scale invasion, as we call it, of Ukraine, happened while I was in that job, and
Yeah.
so at that point, it was pretty clear that we wouldn't be going into Russia anytime soon.
Right.
Yeah, and so after that, I could have extended in DC and retired out of DC, but I decided to go to do one more tour in Belgium, in Mons, which is a French-speaking, in the French-speaking part of Belgium, to work at the Supreme Headquarters, Allied Powers Europe, which is not NATO headquarters. That's in Brussels itself, but it's the NATO military headquarters, let's say.
Yeah.
So that's where SACEUR, the Supreme Allied Commander Europe, is located. I worked initially for General Cavoli, and when he retired, General Grinkovich, who was an Air Force 4-star, came on, and he's been there for about 6 months now.
So
And,
how many languages do you speak?
I speak 4 languages, and I'm working on a 5th right now, which is
So-
Spanish,
English,
English,
Russian,
Russian,
French,
French, and German.
and German, and
Yeah.
you're working on Spanish.
Yeah.
Which one are you the most proficient in or fluent?
Um,
Because your English is a little shaky.
yeah, after English,
Yeah.
I still think my German is the best
Yeah.
of the 3 foreign languages that I speak.
Da.
That's Russian.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think when if we're talking about reading, I can read French better
Yeah.
than I can read German. But speaking, listening,
Living.
living, I'm better in German.
Gotcha.
A bit better in German than I am in French. Although my French isn't. That's actually one of the reasons why I chose to go to Belgium is to kind of improve my spoken French and my ability to live in a French-speaking country. So,
Okay.
and then my Russian has always been the weakest. It's just a difficult language, but I have done some really valuable training in Germany in the last few years. That's really brought it up to almost where my French and German are.
Oh, great. So I want to pivot for a second towards your newly burgeoning literary career. Okay, what's it like being a author? And but tell me really, what was the genesis of this book? How did you get started with it? How did it change along the way? Was anything illuminated as you went through the process? And just, an overview of your experience with it.
Sure. Yeah. So I published a book called Students to Soldiers, in April of this year with UVA Press. It's it's an academic history. Um, I encourage your listeners to purchase a copy at Amazon.com, but it's not exactly a page turner. Although I think
Well,
it's
knowing some of my listeners, they might not get through even turn the page,
what it is. It's an idea. Well, it's a project that really started when I was a cadet. When I wrote my senior thesis on the fourth class system, which was basically the system of acculturation, indoctrination, whatever you want to call it, for plebes, for freshmen. And I wrote my senior thesis on the history of that system, both the precursor to it in the 19th century, and then the official system, which lasted from 1920 to 1990, roughly.
Okay.
And there were still many vestiges of that system when I got to West Point, and that's the system that kind of codified and regulated the hazing that we discussed earlier.
Yeah.
So it's always been interesting to me.
And then you took that experience and compared it and contrasted it against the British monarchical system. And what brought you there?
Yeah. So in when I got my master's thesis, I wrote about the British system of acculturation at the British public schools, which we would call elite boarding schools, right? I can get into why they're called public schools, but they're not actually public. They're elite private boarding schools, and I wrote about how those schools were where the character of the English gentleman was formed, right? And then I thought for my PhD that maybe it would be a good idea to compare and contrast the system at West Point with the system at the British public schools. Now, initially, we'd think, well, the British public schools were not military schools, but almost every officer in the British Army in the 19th into the 20th century went to one of these elite private schools. And so and then I broadened the study out. I mean, it's always good when you're doing a comparative history to have three models to compare. So I broadened it out to include what I call the monarchical cadet schools in Germany, Austria, and Russia. And the time period is from 1815, so the end of the Napoleonic Wars, up to the end of World War II in 1945. And so I can compare these three models of what I call officer acculturation, and really try to get at the practices, rituals, and codes that governed, or that comprise the processes of acculturation at each of those types of schools.
What's the research process like in something like this? Because it's not readily available information to look into the hazing rituals of the British prep schools. How did you go about that whole process?
Yeah, so we'll start with secondary sources, your typical history, books. A lot has been written on West Point and the British schools. Not as much on the cadet schools in Germany, Austria, and Russia. But when you're doing a PhD, you have to dig a little deeper into primary sources. So what I did is I traveled a couple of times up to West Point to get to their special collections, to look at, for example, letters from cadets to their parents, or unpublished memoirs that are in those that collection. Made a couple trips there. I traveled a couple of times to Europe, to Britain, to visit Eton, Harrow, Westminster, Winchester, Wellington, Rugby, and to there are no more cadet schools in Germany. So the information is in the archives, the Prussian archives in Berlin, and also the military archives in Freiburg. So
This is what I'm talking about. You got to go to the archives,
right,
the Prussian
exactly.
archives, to find that stuff.
Yeah. Prussia no longer exists too. So and that was an Allied decision after World War II to do away with Prussia itself as an entity, because the belief was that's where the German militarism came from. Whether or not that was true. In Austria, the schools, there is still a Theresianische Militärakademie. It's now like West Point for college age cadets, but back then it was for teenagers, basically teenage boys. Although the information, the kind of archival material is in Vienna. So
Gotcha.
And then for the Russian school that I studied, the Corps des Pages in St. Petersburg, has a French name, but it was obviously a Russian school, a Russian elite military preparatory school. I wasn't able to go to visit that building, that location, which is still a military school, although of a different name. So I relied on sort of published memoirs that I could access through Columbia's university library.
Gotcha.
So.
And this is such a niche topic. No one's going to accuse you of using ChatGPT.
Right.
You know?
Right.
Which, it's funny. I just opened my social media before you came in. I saw you post about how the power of those tools. And it does make you wonder what the future of authoring will be.
I will tell you, certainly it would have. So the second step in getting a PhD after your master's and your master's thesis is to study for oral examinations in 4 fields. And that's basically so my fields were 19th century German history, Russian history, British history, and then military history in general. And so the idea is to kind of understand the situation when it comes to secondary sources, what's out there, what kind of narratives are out there. It's called historiography, right? Yeah. So you basically become an expert on historiography in those fields. ChatGPT would have helped enormously with that process of studying for those exams. It would have helped less in writing the PhD dissertation. But I think the process of getting a PhD in history is probably going to be shortened in the near future because of
the power of
the power of AI. Yeah. Right now, when it comes to fiction writing, and I'm actually working on a novel right now, it's unless you're writing for yourself, I don't see how fiction writers like a John Grisham or a Stephen King or these Danielle Steele or any of these sort of popular fiction authors who are making millions of dollars, I don't know how that's going to continue because ChatGPT can already write a novel better than John Grisham. Yeah. So as a writer, I really don't think there's any money in that in fiction writing anymore. Right. So if you're going to be a writer, it's just for you. Right. Just do it for the love of the process. Right.
And speaking of technological advancements, and just circle back to you in your time in the armor division of the Army, do you foresee in the future having unmanned tanks, and do you think that what we're seeing in the war in Ukraine with the usage of drones, do you think that this is going to really have an impact on how war is conducted in the future?
Yeah. Yes, it is definitely what we call in the military a revolution in military affairs. That is absolutely clear. Unmanned aerial vehicles, unmanned tanks, as you mentioned, which are not really fielded to a great extent at this point, but will be for sure in the coming years.
Yeah.
The sort of the sort of understanding of the enemy from reconnaissance and surveillance platforms. I mean, it's all revolutionary.
Right.
I would actually argue that it's more than that. It's actually it's actually a military revolution. Now, what's the difference between revolution and military affairs? Military revolutions have the ability to transform the world and global politics, right? And so what I see now is really and even more so, it's a paradigm shift that we haven't seen since the beginning of the nuclear age, for sure.
Right.
And then if you go back farther than that, really since kind of the Napoleonic era. So.
Well, it's interesting where this conflict in the Ukraine is ultimately serving as a test case for the advancement of military technology at
for
this
sure.
inflection point in time.
For sure.
Right.
Yep. And then there's, along with that, so what makes it more than just a revolution in military affairs is that you have, for example, and Russia is, again, kind of the pioneer in this regard in sort of hacking into adversaries, computer systems, these things what we call hybrid warfare. Russia does not use that term, but we call these kind of hybrid methods of messing with your adversary.
Stealing IP and
right.
Yeah.
Right. And so it's really a new age, I think, that we're entering, and it's not, again, this, I think this has the potential to change global politics. So, we tend to think as Americans and as Europeans, we tend to think in terms of nation states and borders that roughly align with a nation, whatever that is. That's not how how we've always looked at the world,
right?
How people have always looked at the world. There have been multinational empires before that. There have been other forms of kind of dividing up the world,
right?
And so we may be entering a new age in terms of that as well.
The craziest part about AI and military advancement is we don't know what we don't know, right? Like there's things that we can conceive of right now, but even at the beginning of the internet age, I don't think we ever could have conceived of how the device revolution has completely changed how we conduct our day-to-day lives, right?
Right.
And so it'll be interesting to see, how, this changes everything for us, you know? And to your point, and linking this back to the book, it'll change what it means to create a soldier, right?
Yeah.
And what that type of, education will entail,
right?
And
Right.
you might say there might be more STEM related focus, but at the same time, if the AI does all the math
Yeah.
and the coding, what purpose does the human really serve other than an overseer of the technology?
Right.
You know?
Yeah, there's that discussion right now about whether AI is going to change kind of the liberal arts or the STEM fields more. Which one will it change? Will it change more fundamentally?
Right. And we're just along for the ride, John.
Yeah,
You know,
yeah.
the coming wave.
I would tell you, I feel very fortunate to have completed this career. Well, by the way, I'm retiring officially on 1 March of next year.
Congratulations. At
thank
the
you.
rank of Lieutenant Colonel?
Yes.
Amazing.
And so, very fortunate to have served and to have had the opportunities that I've had. And the way I think of it is, the Army and the military gave me more than I gave it. I feel, I've had incredible opportunities, and I'm just thankful and grateful for that. But I'm also grateful to have sort of completed this career
At this stage in history.
Right,
Yeah.
as opposed to being 22 years old and wondering,
Where do I go?
where do I go?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, on behalf of everyone, I know I said it earlier, thank you for your service to our country.
Thank you.
We are eternally indebted, and appreciate you coming in and taking the time to tell us about your career and your most recent literary accomplishment. And I think you can buy the book on Amazon.
You can.
Right? As
You
I
can.
just did. The hard copy's a little pricey, but
The soft cover is pretty cheap now. I
soft
think it's
cover
under
and the
$10
Kindle
at
are
this
only
point.
like $1 apart, So
Yeah.
I went with the soft cover.
Yeah, yeah.
But hey, John, buddy, thanks for coming in, man.
Thanks, Pat.
This was great.
Appreciate
All right?
that.
All right, thank you.